Hello and welcome to the second David 67 Celtic News live stream. One or two wee IT issues and streaming issues today, and so hopefully everything works for today's video and for today's live stream. Just wait for a few people to join in. Hopefully get a few comments coming through the comment section, just confirming that everything's working fine. And then we can get going with the content of today's live stream. Things I thought we might want to talk about today could be the game against Falkirk tomorrow. Brendan Rodgers certainly has one or two issues potentially and conundrums potentially with the selection for tomorrow's game against Falkirk in the second round of the Scottish League Cup. Game will be live on Premier Sports TV. Kick-off at 7:45 in the evening. And Rodgers was talking in his press conference earlier today. One or two interesting things coming out of the press conference. Main thing being that Dyson Maida, according to Brendan Rodgers, they're negotiating his contract, and Rodgers fully expects Maida to be with Celtic by the end of the transfer window and for the rest of the time after that. Also, he was a wee bit vague as to what he's going to do in terms of team selection. He says he always puts out the strongest possible team. Did suggest that he might well go with Celtic's strongest team for the game tomorrow. Also did suggest that he may, between the game against Falkirk tomorrow and against Livingston, in between the two Kairat Almaty games, that he might well do a wee bit of resting and rotating of people. And so I've come up with a couple of different versions of the team that we might want to put out for tomorrow's game. Seems to be a balancing act between hi, Anthony Flint. Good to have you here. Good to have more participants. Hopefully things will warm up as we get going. Get more contributions, more thoughts as we go along, and answering any issues and thoughts that are cropping up. Unfortunately, in terms of the transfer window, nothing much happening in terms of Celtic today. There are some rumours regarding a new winger that Celtic are said to be looking at. Haven't actually done any proper research on him so far. Just got a bit of bare bones reading an article about him earlier today. He certainly was a player that I'm going to look into tomorrow. Also, some ongoing rumours regarding the possibility of Celtic signing Jamie Vardy to be a striker at Celtic. Not a move I'm very keen on at all. If you want to pop your own thoughts regarding Vardy coming to Celtic into the comment section, do feel free, but it's not really a move that I think works well for Celtic. And the other thing we thought we would have a chat about today might be a wee bit of a look ahead to the game against Kairat Almaty next Wednesday. Game's going to be at 8:00 at Celtic Park, and Celtic certainly need to get a really good, I think, lead going into the second leg. I did a wee video this morning, doing a bit of a profile of the Kairat Almaty team, the kind of conditions in terms of temperature and altitude, etc., that we're going to face going to Almaty in Kazakhstan. It's a 7,000-mile round trip to get to Kazakhstan. Takes about 7 hours or so as a direct flight, although there are no direct flights from Glasgow or Scotland to Almaty, and so Celtic will need to do a charter flight, and certainly anybody who was flying out to watch the game live in Almaty in Kazakhstan is going to have probably 11 to 13 hours flying, with quite a number of different 2 or 3 stops along the way to get to the ground. So what do people think and feel about Celtic signing Jamie Vardy to come to the club? He is 38 years old. He didn't have a particularly good season for Leicester last year, scoring just 10 goals for them over the course of the season. Had scored 200 goals for Leicester in a very good, distinguished career, 7 international goals for England as well. But his form and goals and output had dipped quite a bit over the last couple of seasons playing for Leicester. He was rumoured to be joining lots and lots of different clubs: Leeds, Crystal Palace, Wolves, some teams in France, Valencia in Spain, which seemed very unlikely, and also quite a lot of rumours about him going off to play in America or the Saudi leagues. That seems much more likely, I think, for him in his career. Doesn't look like he wants to move into coaching or punditry so far, as there was 1 or 2 speculations on another live stream I was watching yesterday about potentially Jamie Vardy having a player-coach role at Celtic. Having a player-coach role at Celtic to try and bring through our young strikers such as Shin Yamada, Johnny Kenny, Callum Osmond, and also the ones in the academy. Great to see you, Paul Maguire. Lots of nice chats through the comment section, debating all the good things and bad things about Celtic, and great to have you joining in. So not massively keen on Jamie Vardy coming to Celtic. Celtic did have back 10, 20 years ago, we did actually bring in quite a number of older players to Celtic. Never really worked out for when we brought in Carlton Cole, Dion Dublin, Ian Wright, Roy Keane, Freddie Lundberg. We got them all in at the end of their careers, and none of them really worked out terribly well for Celtic. And all of them left within 6 months or so of being at Celtic. So I don't see Jamie Vardy as being an option. So thought maybe we'd just pop on to have a wee look at the 2 possible lineups that Rodgers may go with. Yeah, Paul, I agree. Vardy would probably score goals in Scotland. His output for Leicester last year was quite a lot down on what he had been before. 200 goals for Leicester in his career, but only scored 10 goals for Leicester last season. Had a better season the season before with 20, but the season before that, he was back down in single figures. And I do think, having watched him on things like Sky Sports and Match of the Day, etc., that he does seem to have lost quite a lot of his pace, quite a lot of his ability to get in behind defenders, and a bit of his ability to take chances in the box. Great, hail to you as well, Patrick Berry. Lovely to have more people joining the live stream. Not massively sure that Jamie Vardy would be a good long-term bet for Celtic. If he was coming as a player coach, that might well be a factor, but that doesn't look like something that Vardy is planning in terms of his career. Let's say just going to have a wee. So one of the thoughts regarding Rodgers' selection for tomorrow in his press conference, he was kind of implying that quite a number of Celtics players still needed a bit of game time. Because a few of them had been a bit late returning to training. Players like Alsa Johnson, Cameron Carter-Vickers, a bit late to return to playing, to the training fields. Also, Maeda and Hatate were a bit late coming back. and several of them, such as Scales and Ralston, who were involved in international matches, Ida and Scales as well, were a bit late coming back in, and he did imply that several of the players might need a bit of extra game time going into the game against Kirat Almaty next week. So one of my thoughts is that he might well go with what he thinks is our best starting 11, as with the players have got in the squad at the moment. So Kasper Schmeichel in goals, back four of Johnson, Carter Vickers, Scales and Tierney, McGregor, Hattati and Nygren in midfield, Forrest and Maeda out wide and Ida through the middle, with the usual strong backup bench, Trusty, Ralston, Sinisalo, McCowan, Engels, Yamada, Yang, Paulo Bernardo and Kenny. And so not really resting any of the players. I think personally Celtic would be better to do a wee bit of resting and rotating and going with a half and half squad with some options to come off the bench if things aren't going so well, but also giving a few of the backup players and players who haven't had quite so much game time a bit of game time. So Sinisalo on goals, Ralston, Simpson, Puzzi making his debut for Celtic in central defence, Trusty at left centre-back, Scales deputising for Tierney at left-back, McGregor there for experience and to captain the side, very experienced midfielders with Engels and McCowan, Yang and Forrest still out wide with Ida through the middle. On the bench, a couple of our talented academy players, Donovan and McArdle, and then some of the backups who don't get a lot of game time, Inamura, Yamada, Kenny and Tilio, and with a bit of strength coming off the bench with Nygren and Paulo Bernardo and Kenny, and that gives Alistair Johnson, Carter Vickers, Daizen Maeda, Rio Hattati and Kasper Schmeichel a bit of a rest prior to the Almaty game. I think it's a bit of a toss-up which one Rodgers goes with, and he was talking in his press conference today possibly using this game and the Livingston game to get all the players fully match ready and fully match fit, and will be interesting to see how he goes. Be interested to see what you feel yourself regarding which way Rodgers will go. Will he go with his best 11 and keeping the strongest backups on the bench, or will he go for a bit of a 50-50? It'd be really interesting to see what you feel yourselves. So do pop that into the comment section if you do have any thoughts on that matter. As I said, Celtic not making much progress in terms of players coming in. Ongoing rumours, as always, regarding Michel Onge Balakwisha. Every couple of days, it looks like Celtic and Antwerp are close to making a deal, and then it all seems to fall apart. Balakwisha has been back in action with Royal Antwerp and scoring for them as well, I think, in his most recent match. I think Balakwisha would do well at Celtic. I think he has got the skills to do well at Celtic, can play wide right, can play wide left, can play through the middle. Kind of a bit like like Benjamin Nygren, who's a very versatile player. Interesting thing actually with Nygren is he hasn't actually played as a central midfielder terribly much before joining Celtic. He had played that a few times before in Danish and Swedish football earlier in his career, but he primarily had been wide on the right or even playing as an actual out-and-out striker. And so it is quite interesting that Celtic have swapped Nygren to basically be kind of the Matt O'Reilly attacking midfielder role. And so be interesting to see whether Nygren stays in the central midfield role or whether we do end up swapping him out wide if we don't get another player or two in to cover right wing and a player or two to cover out wide on the left. So Balakwisha remains apparently on Celtic radar, still appears to be a player that Celtic are scouting. Last week they did there were suggestions that Celtic might be going for Clement Bischoff of Brøndby or Jacob Broom of Go Ahead Eagles. Both of those do appear to have cooled off. Hasn't really been any progress with either of those two in the press over the last week or so. Interesting story I read just before we switched on for the live stream, that Celtic apparently are linked with a player playing in the United Arab Emirates League. I took the story with a wee pinch of salt because it did seem a little bit of an unlikely target. However, did double check on through transfermarket.com and through Wikipedia, and he does appear to be a real player playing for a real team, and does appear to have had a career out in United Arab Emirates Pro League. Does appear to be quite an impressive young player called Umar Traore, also known as NDFE. 3 caps for Mali at international level with 1 goal. 23 years old. He appears to have been playing in the UAE League for the last 5 seasons or so. Quite successful with his team. Team's called Al Jazeera, which also made me a little bit suspicious because Al Jazeera is also a news station. However, Al Jazeera does appear to be a real team in the UAE League. Over there, he's played 140 games with 24 goals and 19 assists. And it's thought that a transfer fee for him would be set to be €3 million. That's probably about £2.5 million. One of the slight snags is his wages with Al Jazeera in the UAE are €1.5 million a season, which would put him high up in the Celtic earners. As I said, up until about 45 minutes ago, I'd never heard of Umar Traore of Al Jazeera in the UAE, or NDFE, which apparently is his nickname, playing for that club, but I will look into him further. It'd be great to know if anybody's ever heard of Umar Traore, and I do think probably it's yet another of these stories. Oh, great. Hello for David O'Connor as well. Not doing too bad today. Thank you, David. 1 or 2 problems with my IT and cameras and streaming, etc. I don't know what the weather's been like with yourselves, but with me today, it's been thunder and lightning and very, very hot and humid. And quite often when it's hot and humid and thundery, our internet and so on doesn't work quite so well, although it does seem to have settled down quite nicely. Hopefully everything's coming through loud and clear. Hopefully everyone's can hear what I'm saying and there's no breakup with the screen. Do feel free to take, if there are any breakups in the screen or the audio screen, the video or the audio, do certainly say. Now that is an interesting one. Again, I just read that shortly before I came on to do the live stream. Ben Doak has been linked again, coming back to Celtic. But an interesting one. Ben Doak has obviously had a wee bit of an injury-plagued time since he moved from Celtic's Academy B team down to Liverpool. Some very good performances for Liverpool, particularly in their Carabao Cup and some of their European games. Also spent some good time out on loan. I don't personally see it really as being a goer for Ben Doak to come back to Celtic. Celtic and Liverpool certainly have had good relations and a good partnership. There have been a number of players going back and forth between the two clubs. Last time I think we loaned a player from Liverpool was Nat Phillips, and that was a pretty awful deal for Celtic. He was one of the worst players I've seen play for Celtic in 50 odd years of playing. Be great to see Ben Doak come back. He certainly would fill a lot of the needs of Celtic. He's Scottish trained. Came through Celtic's academy, so you tick a lot of boxes in terms of the UEFA need for homegrown players and Scottish players, etc. and clearly a player with tons of talent, lots of pace, and I think he would go straight into Celtic's first team out wide. A lot of speculation that Liverpool are looking to actually sell him, but it may be getting him back to full fitness and full game time. They come into Celtic for 6 months or 12 months. Might well be an option. Paddy Roberts is another player that there has been talk of him coming back to Celtic. He does appear to be more established now than before, and I think he is unlikely to come back to Celtic. So, but could be one of those surprise late loan bids late in the transfer window, and so always would be interesting to see quite what develops with that. Paddy Roberts did have a really good couple of seasons for Celtic on loan, coming to us from Man City. Played primarily down the right-hand side, cutting in on his left foot. Pretty good in terms of passing and chance creation. Scored a good number of goals for Celtic, scored goals for Celtic at all levels, including goals in Europe, and then went off back down to England, played for a variety of different teams. Didn't really get fully settled, but would be quite interesting to see. Well, if anybody can convince players to come to Celtic, the better. I think Kieran Tierney obviously does have a few contacts with his seasons down in with Arsenal, and obviously playing across in Spain as well during that time. Wasn't particularly aware that Kieran Tierney and Paddy Roberts were best of mates, but they certainly were at Celtic at the same time. And so if there is an inside track for getting Kieran Tierney to get Paddy Roberts to come back to the club, or an inside track to get Ben Doak to come back to the club, obviously Ben Doak's been in Scotland squads with players like Forrest and Ralston and McGregor and Tierney and Greg Taylor and so on. And so maybe if there is an inside friendship or inside bonds, that maybe one of them can convince Ben Doak to come back to Celtic. If we got him back on a season-long loan, that would be a great thing, I think, for Celtic. Not the biggest fan of bringing in players from other teams to make them better players, and so if there was any form of transfer fee at the end of that deal, that would be, I think, a great move for Celtic. Very talented young Scottish player, Scottish trained, homegrown at Celtic for several years. He's proven himself at the highest level to be a pretty decent player, lots of pace, good creativity, not the best in goal scoring, but still tons of time for him to improve as a player, and see if that does develop. I'm a wee bit sceptical as to whether that actually is going to prove to be true, but he does appear not to really be in Arne Slot's reckoning as a player for Liverpool. Liverpool seem to have a pretty incredible squad these days, and they seem to have limitless funds for adding more and more top-level players to their squad, and so they will no doubt be probably looking to offload several players. Ben Doak would appear to be one that they are looking to move on. The other interesting one who has been linked to Celtic, again, it was said that Celtic and Liverpool had been in negotiations with him, was Stefan Bajetic, a young Spanish player who has actually, much like Doak, been quite impressive when playing in things like the Caribou Cup and in the European competitions. Doesn't get very many games for Liverpool ordinarily, and I would suspect with the number of players that Liverpool have got to cover midfield and defensive midfield, I suspect that he's probably, much like Ben Doak, probably doesn't have a long-term future at Liverpool. And so if we were to sign him, again, I think Bajetic would turn into a very good player for Celtic, a player in a season or two's time who could easily take over the Callum McGregor role as Callum McGregor starts to play less and less for Celtic. And there always are one or two wee concerns with Callum McGregor's fitness, as he does appear to have had quite a recurring problems with his Achilles tendon and his calf muscles, which has kept him out a wee bit from recent football. other we thought that we could talk about today, I'm not sure how much research and how much knowledge anybody else has regarding Kairat Almaty. Up until about 2 weeks ago, I hadn't really heard of Kairat Almaty, but they have been a successful team in Kazakhstan in recent years, champions last season and top of the table by 3 points currently over Astana. Astana were a team that Celtic played a couple of times, 4 times in total early in Brendan Rodgers' career. We happily got past Astana one way or another, both in Rodgers' first season and his second season. We managed to beat them 5-0 the last time we played them at Celtic Park, and then lost 4-3 over in Kazakhstan. They are quite an interesting team. Play often away from home in a 4-3-2-1 or a 4-2-3-1, and also try and use a bit of width. At home, they are a bit more open, often in a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3. They do have a really very, very talented teenager in their squad called Dastan Satpayev. He is off to Chelsea next summer, 17-year-old. He's pretty much one of their 2-star players, along with Jorginho. Not sure if anybody else read this morning that actually 3 of the team of Kairat Almaty, 3 of Kairat Almaty's team might well have a struggle in getting a visa to come and visit Scotland for the game. They've got 1 Russian and 2 Belarusians in their squad. So basically, their 2 starting centre backs and their star attacking midfielder Gromyko, all of whom are who all are from countries who are not allowed to have visas to come to visit Scotland or the United Kingdom, and so it may take a special intervention by UEFA or the British government, the Scottish government, to allow those players to come and play against us. Not sure it's very fair to stop players coming when they're not really involved in the politics, but rules is rules. But apparently there are negotiations going on between the club, UEFA, and the British government and the Scottish government to see where that can get organised. However, I do think Kairat Almaty are a team that Celtic should really be comfortably beating 3-4-0 at Celtic Park, and then taking the long 3,500 miles, 7-hour flight to Almaty. As I said in my video this morning, 30 degrees centigrade, so high 80s in terms of Fahrenheit temperature out there, even in the early mid-evening. Celtic's game likely to be around about 5:45 our time, a few hours ahead in Almaty. They play at 900 meters above sea level, which is 900 meters above pretty much everywhere in Scotland where people live, and so could be a degree of altitude difficulties for Celtic's players combining the heat and the altitude. And so I think Celtic do need to take a good comfortable lead, 3-4 goals over to Kazakhstan to allow us. And I think also they are a team who, if they are playing in a more open style of football, they do have a lot of space in behind their fullbacks and in behind their central defenders. Again, I think in terms of wide players, David was putting forward 1 permanent and 1 loan. The uncertainty really is with Jota. He's certainly thought to be out at least until January 2026. With anterior cruciates, it can be rather unpredictable. Some people come back really quite quickly from anterior cruciate injuries with all the rehab and strengthening, etc. Some people do take a lot longer to get back. And so if he wasn't fit to play in January, I could easily see that injury dragging on into the end of the season. So I think certainly covering The wide positions, I think we got a couple of permanent players in and a player or two on loan. That would be a great idea. I think in the long term, we do also have to make plans for Dyson Maida potentially leaving the club, but also James Forrest obviously is getting on a bit. And so looking to replace him in the long term is important. I'm a big fan of Marco Tilio. He's played really, really well in Australian football. He was very, very impressive out there on loan, but I don't think Brendan Rodgers is ever going to give Marco Tilio a chance in the Celtic team. And so I think Celtic certainly need to get a couple or three wide players in. No, the long trip to Kazakhstan is I can't see it being much fun. Obviously, Celtic are a wee bit lucky in that they'll have an extra day of travel because they're playing the Livingston match on the Saturday. Then I guess they're probably going to fly out late on the Saturday or very early on the Sunday. Gives them a day or two to acclimatise to Kazakhstan, to the heat and the altitude. And then they've got the game, which will be tea time, our time, but mid-late evening Kazakhstan team time. So it might be a wee bit cooler than the high 80s. But certainly it's a long trip to get out to Kazakhstan, and I say the heat and the altitude could well be a factor as well. A lot of people are sceptical regarding Balikwisha. I think had Balikwisha come to us before his second most recent injury, I think he would have been a much better player. He struggled to come back from his most recent injury. A lot of stories were suggesting that he was very much lined up to come to Celtic in the summer of 2024, so 12 months ago, and then unfortunately got injured at the end of their pre-season, the start of their main season, and he certainly seems to have struggled over the course of the 24-25 season to get himself back fit and into Antwerp's team. He did play some games in early 2025, was a bit undercooked, not really fully fit. However, he does appear, as I said, to be getting back towards his better form. However, the highlights I've seen of him at the end of last season and the start of this season does suggest he's not quite so pacey as he used to be, and not quite got the same trickery. But I think if he did get back to his best from a couple of years ago, I think he would be a very, very good player for Celtic. Someone was also suggesting one of the options with Dyson Maida would be bringing Dyson Maida in off the wing and playing Dyson. Paul Maguire was suggesting putting Dyson Maida through the middle. I think Maida obviously worked really, really well at the end of last season. Scored a ton of goals for Celtic, both playing from out wide on the left, sometimes playing out wide on the right. And then he kind of took over from Kyogo at the start of 2025 when Kyogo got sold to Rennes. And then Maida, obviously very big success for Celtic in the second half of the season. Not quite sure why Dyson Maida hasn't really returned to those levels. It may be a coincidence, but his form slightly dipped at the end of last season, coinciding with when he flew home to Japan for the birth of his third child. His wife then stayed in Japan because the baby took a bit longer to come. Dyson Maida then came back to Scotland and didn't fly back to Japan until the end of the season. I'm not sure if his wife and kids are back over in Scotland or whether they're still in Japan, but maybe it's just having a baby who's a few months old is disrupting his sleep and making him tired, but he hasn't really quite hit his heights since the start of the season. I thought he did play a bit better against Aberdeen on Sunday than he had against St Mirren the previous Sunday. He's one of the players where Rodgers needs to make a decision whether to give him 60 minutes or so against Falkirk tomorrow night, or whether to keep him on the bench and throw him on late on if needed. The last thing I think Celtic do need, though, is for Dyson Maida, Carter Vickers, Tierney, McGregor, Negrin, etc. to get injured. And certainly any further injuries in the wide positions would leave us rather sparse in terms of wide players, which might then mean that we do use players like Negrin, Yamada, who can play out wide. Not sure if anybody saw the Celtic B against Clyde game from a few nights ago, but Callum Osman was very impressive with his pace. And there has been some speculation that Osmond could also be a bit like Dyson Maida, used out wide, although he's primarily a central player. A Dyson Maida, I think, is he did actually, when he came to Celtic under Ange Postecoglou 3-4 years ago, he was primarily a centre forward rather than a wide player. Ange pretty much converted him straight away to playing wide, cutting in off his wing as a sort of old-fashioned inside forward style of play. Obviously, at that time, we had Lila Bada, the young Israeli international, on the other side. He also was really good at cutting in at the back post to score. And Dyson Maida, as I say, primarily in Japan, had played as a central striker. He carried on playing for Japan as a central striker, even though he's playing out wide on the left for Celtic. And I think possibly Dyson Maida's best position could well be through the middle. He's got lots and lots of pace. Very few teams can keep up with that level of pace. He does also give Celtic a big advantage in terms of pressing the ball and putting pressure on defenders, preventing them getting the ball out. So I think Dyson Maida is a very good player, and it was quite reassuring in the press conference earlier today that Brendan Rodgers was, in essence, saying there's no thoughts or plans or possibility of Dyson Maida leaving Celtic in this transfer window, and hopefully that carries on for the rest of the season, and hopefully we can keep hold of all our current players, and over the last couple of weeks or so add in more players. Quite a lot of transfer sites and journalists and football sites are suggesting that quite a lot of teams are waiting till all the European qualifiers are over, and then when their team is knocked out of the qualifiers, then offloading some of the players, and for the ones who do actually qualify for the final stages of the Champions League, Europa League, or the Conference League, some of them might well be looking also to looking to add to their squads. So a lot of teams are apparently waiting to the last couple of weeks of the transfer window, and then they're going to start buying and selling more players. And it does look like Celtic are also doing that. I thought it was quite interesting also in Brendan Rodgers' press conference earlier today. He was saying that Celtic always do their business in the last weeks of the transfer window. Well, that certainly seemed to be the case before Ange Postecoglou was the manager, and now after Ange Postecoglou was the manager. But one of the things that Ange Postecoglou did in his transfer windows was got players in nice and early. Players like Rio Hatate, Dyson Maida, and Itaguchi all came in at the very end of the December, came to train with Celtic even before they were signed by Celtic, and that way all three of them were ready to be in the first team squad pretty much straight away in January. Similar with Alistair Johnston coming from Major League Soccer in America. He came to train with Celtic in the week between Christmas and New Year, and then he was ready to make his debut against Rangers. I think it was the 4th of January, but certainly within a day or two of signing for Celtic, officially, Alistair Johnston was in the squad and in the team to play Rangers, and the rest is history. He's been one of my favourite players of recent years at Celtic. I think he is the player that I would personally choose to be the next Celtic captain. I think if and when Callum McGregor does start to cut back on his playing time, it may well be Kieran Tierney if he's still fit, maybe Cameron Carter-Vickers, who seems to be the nominated vice-captain at the moment. But I would be much happier to see a player with the passion and aggression and love of Celtic, like Alistair Johnston taking over as captain. That was a problem. It's something that a lot of people have raised, David, is last season we spent the best part of 30 odd million in the summer transfer window. We spent approximately 11 million on Engels. He at the moment is on the bench, doesn't look like he's starting, although there is some thoughts that Engels is more a player that's going to do well for us in the Champions League games, that his style is more used to that sort of game rather than the Scottish style of game. Adam Ida has spent a lot of the season, last season, as a bench player, on and off the bench, making some starts, making some substitute appearances. He did score 20 goals last season, which is a pretty decent output for a player who was spending over half the time as a sub, not getting as many starts. So his goal output actually was quite impressive. However, it does look like Adam Ida is one of the players that Brendan Rodgers is thinking about replacing. We've got Austin Trusty, who kind of has played half the games, and Liam Scales has played the other half of the games since Trusty joined the club late August last year. So he's again not a regular first-team starter. In essence, the only first-team starter that came to us last summer is Kasper Schmeichel. He came for free, so there is a lot of speculation that possibly, if you think about, we spent 11 on Engels, 9 on Ida, 6 on Trusty, 3.5 million on Paulo Bernardo, another player who seems to be a substitute rather than a first-team starter. We spent the best part of 30 million, and possibly the two transfers that worked the best for us last summer were Luke McCowan, who came for $1 million. He's been a brilliant player coming off the bench. Seems quite happy to be a player who comes off the bench and then makes the occasional start. I think he's been a successful transfer, and obviously Schmeichel was a very good goalkeeper for us last season, and he came for free. And so I think there is a degree of agreeing that you do wonder about Brendan Rodgers' judgment. I did a video, I think about a year or so ago, having a look at Brendan Rodgers' transfer record as a Celtic manager, but also looking a bit at his transfer record as a Liverpool manager and Leicester manager, and certainly over the period with Celtic twice, Liverpool and Leicester, not got the biggest success rate in transfers. Some of Celtic's worst signings of all time came during the John Barnes era, and some of Celtic's worst signings of all time also came in the Brendan Rodgers time. And some of they also signed some rather poor players for Liverpool and for Leicester, wasting an awful lot of money. Yeah, to be fair, I thought Trusty was one of our best players in the pre-season, although almost straight away he's been relegated behind Liam Scales, and at the moment it appears that Kieran Tierney plays 60 minutes. Then we swap Scales to left back and bring in Trusty at left centre back. Actually, keener for Celtic to use Austin Trusty rather than Liam Scales. So I prefer Trusty to Liam Scales. I think Trusty's got a bit more pace, got a bit more recovery pace, and Trusty I think is a better passer. Also like the fact that Trusty organises the defence really nicely as well. He often is indicating to his teammates to make runs or to cover back, etc. And I do like a player who is very vocal in defence. That's one of the benefits of Kieran Tierney. It's one of the benefits of Alistair Johnston on the other side. Cameron Carter-Vickers does appear to be quite a quiet player, Doesn't appear to be a player that organises the defence quite the way that we would want. And that's another reason I would prefer an Alistair Johnston or a Kieran Tierney to be the vice-captain over the course of this season rather than Cameron Carter-Vickers. Haven't seen actually an official announcement regarding who is officially going to be McGregor's backup, but certainly Carter-Vickers has taken the armband a couple of times. I have to say I was in Paulo Bernardo when he came to us on loan. I thought he actually was very impressive. I think he coped well with being a player coming off the bench. He had quite a number of good performances for us in a rather unsuccessful Champions League campaign. Did have a bit of problems with injury last season. I think also Celtic don't quite know where to play him. Seems to have played for Celtic in a variety of different positions. Seems to play in a different position when he's captaining the Portuguese under-21 side. He seems to have been in the Portuguese under-21 side for a number of years, even though he's actually a couple of years over 21 now. And would be interesting to see how his career develops. Not sure what other people's thoughts are regarding Andy Irving of West Ham. He wasn't a player that really impressed me when he played all those years ago for Hearts. He then went off to low-level football in Germany, slightly higher level football in Austria for Klagenfurt, then came back to West Ham, got loaned back to Klagenfurt for another season, and then had a rather unsuccessful season for West Ham last year. However, he did enough to get into Stevie Clarke's international squad, made his international debut in the summer. Wasn't terribly impressive for Scotland in that game either, but seems to be a player that everybody wants. But I can't quite see how he fits into Celtic's way of playing. Can't really see what the sense is of signing Andy Irving, other than the fact that he's Scottish and he would fill obviously a role in terms of being Scottish player for UEFA coefficients, and his wage levels at West Ham apparently are relatively low, around about £5,000 to £10,000 a week. So certainly wouldn't break Celtic's bank balance in terms of a transfer or his basic contract, but I wouldn't be personally very keen to see Andy Irving come to Celtic, and it does appear that story's kind of gone quiet. Rumours that he may be going to Rangers instead, and rumours that he may be going off to Germany or Italy or France. Personally, I don't really see him as being a Celtic player. Not sure what other people think about Andy Irving, but he certainly isn't a player that I thought, oh great, we're going to sign him. I don't really think he's going to any better than Luke McCowan, certainly not any better than Rio Atati, Arnie Engels, Negrin, McGregor. No. So David, completely agree. Not for me. If we're talking about Andy Irving, he's not for me either. And I'd be disappointed if Celtic sign him. I think Celtic's actually got some really talented young midfielders, people like Turley, McArdle, a couple of players out on loan at Ayr, and a few other Scottish clubs. And I think they should be players that we're looking to get into the first team squad over the next year or two. I don't think one of the things that's actually disappointed me about several Celtic managers in a row has been the fact that we have not been very good at retaining our young players. Ben Doak obviously went off and was a big success down in England, although he has been injured quite a lot. Rocco Vat has not been tremendously successful. Daniel Kelly's not been terribly successful. Daniel Cummings went down to West Ham. He got himself injured and is going to be out apparently for a few months with a shoulder problem, needing an operation. But it is disappointing that we've lost some of our best young talented players. We invest a lot of time and money in them, bringing them through from schoolboys to being academy players, bringing them into the fringe of the squad, and then we seem to lose them. Yes, Andy Irving, that's how I described Andy Irving, was a journeyman. he isn't for me, not a player. Pat McLaughlin, great. Hail to you as well, Pat. Again, regular contributors to the comment section and particularly the daily trivia question section. So great to have you join us as well. I think personally that there are quite a lot of different Celtic pundits and live streams and Celtic websites who do suggest that Paolo Bernardo is being developed to be the player to take over from Callum McGregor in the long run. I'm not convinced that he actually is at his best playing as a defensive midfielder. I think he is a good player. I'm not convinced that his ability to spread the ball is quite high enough. Not sure that he's quite got the ability that a Callum McGregor or a Scott Brown or a Neil Lennon or a Paul Lambert had for recovering the ball and getting things moving again. Bajetic has filled that role quite often for Liverpool, and I think he probably would be a better bet than Paolo Bernardo, and then we could use him maybe a wee bit further forward. I think Celtic should be looking at long-term planning. I think Cal McGregor obviously is probably reaching the last few years of his good time with Celtic. Rio Hatate, in speculation regarding Rio Hatate leaving for the last 2 or 3 years. He still seems to be at Celtic. He seems to be very happy at Celtic at the moment. He and Daizen Maeda will be likely off to the World Cup next summer in America and Canada and Mexico. And I do wonder whether possibly that after the World Cup over in North America, that maybe Maeda and Hatate might move on after the next World Cup. I think they probably might well want a bit of stability in terms of their football to keep themselves in the Japanese international squad. Obviously, Kyogo moved to French football with Rennes, hoping that would get him back into the Japanese squad. That seemed to backfire, and I'm not very sure whether the Japanese international manager would feel playing for Birmingham is better than playing for Celtic. And interestingly, it was Shin Yamada that was called up to the Japanese squad rather than Kyogo for the most recent tournament that Japan were playing. I did actually read about both Raheem Sterling and Federico Chiesa. I personally can't see Raheem Sterling coming to Celtic in a million years. His wage demands, I think, would be way, 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 way beyond Celtic's ability. Federico Chiesa, he was a bit of a surprise signing for Liverpool. He hasn't really played that much for Liverpool. I think he actually would be a fine player to come to Celtic. But again, I'm not convinced that Chiesa would want to drop from playing for Liverpool and being a player on the bench and to drop down to be playing for Celtic. And again, also I think any kind of loan deal or wage demands would be outside of Celtic's budget as well. But I think Chiesa is a better possibility than Sterling, but I would say both are, for me, are extremely unlikely. I know not all Celtic fans share my admiration of the board, but I'm sure quite a lot of us who are on the live stream, or certainly who subscribe and watch the David 67 channel, I think quite a lot of us are older Celtic supporters. I remember the awful days of the 90s when we were in financial real major trouble, reportedly a couple of days away from being bankrupted and liquidated. Then Fergus McCann came in with his millions, paid off all the debts, got some financing, renovated Celtic Park, and then sold the club on to Dermot Desmond. And since that time, Celtic's been a very well-managed club financially. We've got lots of money in the bank. We've got money for keeping our best players on high salaries. I think that's an important thing, is we've put the salaries and the contracts up for players like Carter Vickers and Maeda and Hatate and Johnston and McGregor and many others. I think that's actually an important thing for keeping plenty of money. And also it has allowed Celtic to renovate the Barrowfield training into a much more high-tech sports science place. They've got space there for the men and women's academy and also the women's team, and also a lot of extra medical facilities and physical facilities. So I think that's really important. And there are some stories that Celtic will be looking to improve Celtic Park, make it more modern, maybe even increase the capacity another 10,000 or so. So I think it's important for Celtic to be financially well managed and have plenty of money in the bank. I think it's certainly a much better position for Celtic to be in rather than our rivals across the city, who seem to be forever in financial problems. Oops. Hi to you as well, Fencing Philly, joining us late. Fencing Philly, another of my long-term contributors. Fencing Philly, Pat McLaughlin, David Corner, Paul Maguire, pretty much all been with me from near the start a couple of years ago. It's been a fun time creating the channel and developing the channel, and little by little we're adding more subscribers and more viewers, and it's all been great fun. And now we're doing these live streams. Oh, nothing to apologize, nothing to apologize for, Fencing Philly. Always delighted to have people join. As I said in my wee promo for the today's live stream, no problem with people joining late, no problem with people popping in and out. It's great to share opinions, great to share thoughts with other Celtic fans. I did, when just before I started the live stream, Hibs were 2-0 down, so that was level on aggregate, while surprisingly Dundee United were 2-0 up on the night, so they were ahead on aggregate. Don't know how actually Hibs have done in their second half. From what Pat's suggesting, that probably implies that must have gone into extra time as level. I actually thought the Hibs would actually get through that game against Partizan comfortably, so it's been a bit of a surprise that they've been having a struggle. Hopefully the home field advantage will get them through. Hopefully Dundee United manage to hold on to their lead to get themselves through an aggregate. The further the other teams do in terms of getting through to later stages of European competitions, the better. Scotland's coefficient is rather poor, partly because Celtic for a couple of years were having a bit of a struggle getting anywhere in the Champions League. Happily last year we did so much better that will have a kicking in effect, not next year but the year after. And so the better that Hibs and Dundee United do, the better that Celtic do, the better for Scottish football, and the easier it would be for us to get into the Champions League. I do remember a few years ago we had to go through 3 and 4 rounds to get into the Champions League. Happily this year it's just the one, and we'll find out quite what the situation is regarding next year's Champions League qualifying. But I dare say it's going to be probably a couple of rounds. Right, interesting to note, so it says Hibs 3-3, so hopefully Hibs can come through that and get themselves into the final qualifying round, because if they and Dundee United got into the Conference League, that's really going to help us, help Celtic in the long run in terms of all right, okay, right here. All right, that's a bit disappointing that both the two of them are in extra time. So, hopefully they can both come through with the home advantage of playing the second leg at home. Right. Right. Okay. So. One other wee thing I thought might be fun to have a look at was a couple of days ago I did a wee video predicting what I thought would be the eventual 1st to 12th positions in the Scottish Premiership. Not too surprisingly, I predicted Celtic to come first, Livingston to come 12th. Dundee, I think, are going to really struggle this season. Got a lot of problems behind the scenes. A squad that's lost some of their best players, change of manager. Not massively convinced that Stephen Presley's a particularly good manager. They've had a pretty awful Scottish League group stage campaign. Falkirk got in 10th. I think they probably are good enough to stay up. Motherwell in 9th. Kilmarnock 8th. St Mirren 7th. Then Dundee United, Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs, Rangers and Celtic. Hearts and Hibs, I think, are difficult teams to predict. I think they've both got good squads. I can certainly see them giving Celtic problems this season. Aberdeen, they do seem to have lots of good players, a good manager, but they don't seem to be really turning it out on the pitch. And teams like St Mirren, Kilmarnock, Motherwell, I think, are always very difficult to predict. They all are teams with good managers, good structure. They seem to be able to find players for next to nothing and mould them into a team. I think both St Mirren and Dundee United are lucky with the quality of their managers. But certainly I found doing a prediction for this season difficult. The easiest thing, I think, was predicting Livingston to come last and Celtic to come first. Some people actually predicting that Rangers might drop out the top two. I think probably they've got enough quality in their team, although it'll be interesting to see who at their club stays and who their club goes. As I think if they don't qualify for the Champions League, they might well have quite a clear out of players. I think, again, another of the bonuses of Celtic being financially very strong and very well managed behind the scenes in terms of our finances is that we can refuse transfer bids and only really let players go if we don't need them anymore. People like Navroki, Palma, Lagerbielka, etc. So if we don't need them anymore, we can let them go, and really letting only players like Kuhn, O'Reilly and Kyogo go when they demand a move. And then 6 months later, we give into it and get the most money for them. I think that's one of the benefits of Celtic's finances at the moment is we can turn down big bids and keep hold of players and then reward them with big contracts to keep them at the club as well. Yes, so Falkirk have had a bit of a disappointing start to the season, which in terms of going to playing us tomorrow in the League Cup is good. I think they will in the long term come good as a team. Motherwell, be interested to see how they cope without their best player, Lennon Miller. He's been very important to them for the last couple of seasons. And now that he's off to Udinese, I think they could have a big hole in their team, although they have been coping okay without him in the first few games of the season. Quite a number of stories about Lennon Miller being a player that Celtic let go through their fingers. Let go for their fingers. I've got one or two inside sources at Motherwell, people who knew him from school and stuff, and they're suggesting that Lennon Miller never had an intention of staying in Scottish football. He always was wanting to get off to European football. And so the one or two stories from various journalists at the Daily Record and the Go Radio saying that Celtic lost the chance to get Lennon Miller. I don't think actually Celtic had much of a chance to get Lennon Miller because he didn't want to come to Celtic, he didn't want to go to Rangers, didn't want to stay in Scotland. He wanted to go off and play in Europe, and he's got his dream and he's off to Udinese. Oops. Fencing Philly makes a good point there. Rangers cheating financially. by all normal rules of the law and finances and VAT and courts, etc., back in 2012, they should have been put completely out of business, massively in debt, owing the taxman VAT, owing lots and lots of creditors, millions and millions and millions of pounds. They spent a lot of money on legal bills and got a very, very favourable decision through the courts and managed to keep hold of many of their players, keep hold of their ground, keep hold of their training ground, keep a hold of a lot of their assets. Most teams who go bankrupt like they did get completely liquidated, and they end up selling off the majority of their assets. Rangers, for one reason or another, got to keep hold of a lot of their assets and break an awful lot of rules. And Fencing Philly makes a point about Rangers cheating financially. Well, they cheated financially through the 80s and 90s and got themselves great success, and then they ended up bankrupting their club. But and so maybe they did get their comeuppance in the end. Yep. Yeah. certainly, Udinese in Italy is a way sunnier than Motherwell. As I say, I've got family across in the Motherwell area. Always nice to go and visit them in the Motherwell area, but certainly the weather not so good for over there. And I think Lennon Miller probably actually would have been a good player for Celtic. The difficulty would have been whether he would have broken into Celtic's starting 11 in the long run. Hello. One or two wee problems there with the IT, unfortunately, as I said at the start of the live stream, for those that were who joined a wee bit later on. My computers and internet and stuff has been a bit temperamental today, and unfortunately it's shut down there. Presumably things are up and running again, and people can see me and hear me again. If someone could just pop a wee comment into the comment section just to confirm that they can hear me and see me again, and then we can crack on for another 10-15 minutes or so if there are things other people want to talk about. Good. So apologies for things not going so well with the live stream there. One of the risks, unfortunately, as I say, earlier today, the internet was playing up with the thunder and lightning. Yep. Oh, good. Right. So, does appear that Hibs have managed to score to go 4-3 up on in the game, which is good. I think Dundee United are still level in their one, just at the end of extra time. So that one might well be going to penalties. Oh goodness! So good, great. Thank you for all those people confirming that I'm back. I'm very sorry that things crashed for 5 minutes in the middle there, and everything went frozen. Hopefully, if the channel keeps on growing, a few more subscribers every few days for Christmas, maybe Santa Claus can get me better camera and better IT stuff. Good. So, don't know what people's predictions are regarding tomorrow's game against Falkirk. I personally have gone for a 3-0 win for Celtic. I think no matter whether we play our best 11 from the start or a bit of a mix and match of our starters and our backups, I think either way, Celtic are going to have too much for Falkirk tomorrow. So I'm going to go for a 3-0 win. It'd be great to see Adam Ida score a goal or two, get his confidence up. I think Ida, when he's confident, 5-0. I would love to see Celtic beat Falkirk tomorrow 5-0. I think that would make a lot of us that bit calmer. It'd be great to see Dyson Midas scoring a goal or two, Adam Ida scoring a goal or two. I think those two players could be very important against Kira Almaty. As I said, I did a wee video about how they play, how they line up. They tend to be quite defensive at home, and particularly in the game against Slovan Bratislava, they defended quite deep, but they still seem to have a lot of space behind their back four. Don't have the fastest of central defenders. Quite a lot of aerial presence and height in their central defence, but not much in the way of so 5-0 win tomorrow against Falkirk would be brilliant. Last season, around about the same time, Brendan Rodgers did a bit of a mix and match, bringing in quite a lot of the backup players, resting a few of the first team players, and Celtic looked at that day very, very disjointed. 2-1 down at half time. Happily, when we brought on some substitutes, primarily Nicholas Kuhn, things really very much turned round. Adam Ida scored 2, and Nicholas Kuhn scored 2 to bring us back from 2-1 down with 20 minutes to go to winning the game 5-2 in the end quite comfortably. And so it would be great to see Celtic get that kind of win tomorrow. Well, certainly for Santa Claus could bring us a few new players in the transfer window in January, the month of January. Hopefully, at that point, we've got the opportunity to be adding a couple of players to our Champions League squad because we've managed to get through to the knockout stage again. I think probably in terms of Celtic's hopes for the season, I think a couple of trophies, so winning the league and winning one or both the cups. I think that should really be very much Celtic's target. And I think getting into the knockout stage again of the Champions League, I think that certainly is something that Celtic can very much achieve. I think we've got a good squad. We've kept quite a lot of the players from last season. Admittedly, we have lost Nicholas Kuhn, who was for much of the season an important player, although there were spells last season where Kuhn was off form, not quite at his best. But we do certainly have a big hole, I think, out wide on the right, which does need filled one way or another in the next couple of weeks. But Sarah would agree. Let's hope Santa does bring us a couple of players in the January transfer window, and the equivalent of Santa in the summer brings us a couple more players or more in this transfer window. I think certainly do need players out wide. Some doubt as to whether we need another striker. Probably, I think we do need a real first choice number one striker. And probably a backup at left back would also be useful as well. At the moment, Rodgers seems to be using a mixture of Tierney and Scales. I would be interested to see Hayato Inamura getting a bit of a run out tomorrow against Falkirk. And it will be interesting to see what starting 11 and subs Rodgers puts out tomorrow evening for the Falkirk game. Grand. Okay. Yep, so the Dundee United match appears to be in added time, in extra time. Looks like it's going to be destined for penalty kicks, unfortunately. Yep, they're now saying that the game between Dundee United and Rapid Vienna is now going to go to penalty kicks. So it was 2-2 in Vienna, 2-2 over here in Dundee. Sad that they gave up their 2-goal lead on the night, and it's now going to go to penalty kicks. And it does look like Hibs are still ahead of Partizan Belgrade, so maybe they're going to get through on the evening. So I think it's now getting on for nearly 10:30, so I think we should maybe call it a day. And let's all get a nice night's rest before tomorrow's game against Falkirk, depending on whether we're going to watch it on TV like I will be on Premier Sports, or those who are going to go to the game. So I think we'll call it a day for the live stream. Thanks for everybody who's been participating so enthusiastically. Thanks for everybody who's been popping in and out. All the people who've been putting forward their thoughts and comments and questions. And thank you, David. Thank you for the positive feedback. It is good fun. It is good fun to have a chat with other Celtic fans. It's been fun to do the videos. It's been fun to do the live streams. And we'll make plans to do another live stream next Thursday. Fitting it in probably around the same time next Thursday, depending on how one or two other wee things sort out, and hopefully try and get the IT and the cameras and everything to work better. So night to yourself, Pat McLaughlin. Night, David Connor. Night night, Paul Maguire. Night night, Sarah and Fencing Philly as well. And see you all again next week. So goodbye and hail, hail.